There are some cases that are just impossible to process. Not because they're particularly violent, not because there are many victims, but because the circumstances are so strange and complex, they leave you questioning everything for a long time. The story of James Bulger is one of the saddest and most heartbreaking stories ever told in the UK. And not just because of what happened, but because of who did it. James was only 2 years old, a little boy with big eyes and a shy smile, just beginning to understand the world. But one ordinary day during a quick visit to a shopping center, he disappeared. And when the truth came out, the entire country froze. Because the people responsible weren't adults. They weren't serial killers. They were just two kids, two 10-year-old boys. James Patrick Bulger was born on March 16, 1990. His mother, Denise, always described him as cheerful, playful, a bit mischievous, like any kid his age. They lived in Kirkby near Liverpool in a working-class family, humble but close. His father, Ralph Bulger, was a laborer. And even though his relationship with Denise was rocky, they both loved their son deeply. On Friday, February 12, 1993, Denise took James to the Strand shopping center in Bootle. It was supposed to be a quick outing. They just needed to buy some meat from the butcher, then head home. They went into a store called A.R. Tim's. James was walking right beside her. At one point, while Denise was paying, James wandered toward the entrance. It only took a few seconds. She was digging through her purse, getting her change, and when she looked up, James was gone. She ran out, asking employees, shoppers, anyone she could find, but no one had seen him. What started as a typical case of a child wandering off quickly escalated, and within a few hours, police patrols were circling the area. The shopping center they were in was the largest in the area. It had security cameras, but the quality was terrible, and there weren't many of them. Still, one of those cameras managed to capture something. At 3:42 p.m., James Bulger was seen walking, holding hands with an older boy. Beside them, another young boy followed. 3 kids walking together, 2 older, 1 very small. To anyone watching, it just looked like a group of brothers. And that's what made it so disturbing. Nothing looked out of place. Because of the low video quality, you couldn't really tell how old the older boys were. They looked maybe 13 or 14, which gave James's family a bit of hope. If it's just some kids, they thought, they probably won't do anything bad. They were wrong. Just 2 days later, the police got a call that led them to check the train tracks. Some children had been playing nearby when they discovered what looked like the remains of another child. It was James. The police, connecting the discovery to the case from the shopping center, contacted the Bulger family. And what they confirmed was the worst possible news. A forensic team examined the scene and concluded that James had died before the train hit him. Whoever left his body there had done it to make it look like an accident, but it wasn't. The injuries were so severe, so numerous, that the experts couldn't even determine which one had actually caused his death. And there was more. James's body had batteries placed in his mouth, and one of his eyes had been smeared with blue paint. Everything pointed to one thing: James had suffered, and his final moments had been horrific. The community was devastated. But instead of coming together, people turned their rage toward Denise, James's mother. Many blamed her, saying, if she had been more careful, none of this would have happened. Meanwhile, the police were desperate. The only clue they had was the grainy footage from the mall. It was nearly impossible to make out faces or details. Then, something unexpected happened. The parents of a boy named Jonathan Green called the police. They believed their son matched the appearance of one of the boys in the footage. The police interrogated Jonathan for over 23 hours, but in the end, he was cleared. He was innocent. Even though he was cleared, the community still treated Jonathan like he was guilty. The harassment against him, just 12 years old, and his family got so intense that they had to disappear for a while. Years later, in an interview, Jonathan said the interrogation had been so brutal, he actually thought about confessing to something he hadn't done, just to make it stop. The surveillance footage from the mall went viral across the country. It was shown over and over on national television. And just like Jonathan's parents, many people started calling the police, accusing random kids. One of those calls stood out. It named 2 boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson. They were both just 10 years old. The police decided to visit their homes. At first, they didn't expect much. Who would ever believe that two 10-year-olds could be involved in something so horrific? But from the moment they stepped inside, they noticed something strange. The kids were nervous, though honestly, what 10-year-old wouldn't be nervous with the police at their door? What really raised flags was this. Both John and Robert had skipped school the day James disappeared. Then, while checking their clothes, investigators found a key piece of evidence. John's shoe had blue paint on it, the exact same color found on James's face. The boys were taken to the station for questioning. At first, both denied everything and kept contradicting themselves. But the police couldn't push too hard. They were just kids. Robert stayed quiet, cold. He never cried, never asked for his parents. He barely reacted to anything. It was like he didn't feel anything at all. John, on the other hand, tried to resist. He cried a lot, denied everything, but eventually he broke, and he confessed. What he said shocked even the most experienced officers. That day, John and Robert went to the mall without any real purpose. They had skipped school and were just messing around, stealing candy, a can of blue paint, and a few batteries. And then, they came up with an idea that sounded like something out of a nightmare. They wanted to grab a smaller child and throw him into traffic, just for fun, to see what would happen. They tried once before. They spotted a distracted mom and called over her child. Luckily, she saw what was happening and pulled him back just in time. Then they saw James. He was near the butcher shop, and when his mom looked away, they called out to him, and he went with them. Once they had him, they left the mall as fast as they could. Their plan had changed slightly. Now they wanted to throw him into a nearby canal and let him drown. But James didn't drown. He hit his head hard and ended up with a big bump on his forehead. It's estimated that over 30 people approached the boys to check if everything was okay. Each time, they calmly replied that James was their little brother or that they were taking him to a police station to find his parents. It's easy to look back now and think someone should have done something. But who would ever suspect two 10-year-olds? After walking nearly 4 kilometers, they reached the train tracks in a remote area known as Walton. It was starting to get dark. The place was completely deserted, and that's where the horror began. Describing what they did is difficult, especially when you remember that James was just a baby. He was only 2 years old. John and Robert started throwing things at him, stones, bricks, whatever they could find. They pushed him onto the tracks. They kicked him, they hit his head, they pulled down his pants. There was no confirmed evidence of sexual assault, but there were disturbing injuries. Forensic experts found wounds in James's genital area. The final blow, it seems, was delivered using an iron bar, a railway piece weighing more than 10 kilos. It shattered several of his bones. Though even today, no one knows if James was still alive when that happened. Afterwards, they covered his body with stones and left him lying across the tracks. Their plan was that the train would run over him and make it look like an accident. They were 10, and yet what they did was calculated, deliberate, and cruel. A few hours later, a train passed over James' lifeless body. After the confessions and early investigation, police and child psychologists began looking deeper into John Venable's and Robert Thompson's home lives. They needed to understand what could lead two children to do something like this. What they found was dark, but not entirely surprising. Robert Thompson was the 5th of 7 siblings. His father had abandoned the family when Robert was 5, and according to social services, his mother struggled with alcoholism and severe depression. The children grew up almost entirely unsupervised. Their home life was filled with violence, shouting, and neglect. According to social workers, Robert was a compulsive liar. He had been stealing since he was very young, constantly getting into fights, and had shown aggressive behavior toward other children. John Venables, on the other hand, also came from a broken home. His parents were separated, and he lived caught in the middle of their constant fighting. His mother tried to care for him, but she was overwhelmed. John had frequent episodes of rage. At school, he would hit himself against furniture, throw things, and even bite other kids. He had been placed in special education due to his behavioral problems, and sometimes he would say worrying things, like if he got expelled, he would run away and then take his own life. Both boys had grown up in difficult, loveless environments, and while that doesn't make them victims or excuse what they did, it does raise a lot of questions. The trial began in late 1993 and lasted a little over 2 weeks. It was complicated from the start. The defendants were two 10-year-old boys, but the crime they had committed didn't feel like something children could do. The courtroom was packed. Journalists camped outside the building, and out on the street, people were demanding justice or revenge. During the trial, everything came out: the walk with James, the CCTV footage, forensic evidence, school records, and psychological evaluations. Those evaluations made one thing very clear. These boys knew what they were doing. They knew it was wrong, and they did it anyway. Neither of them apologized, not once. John cried at times, but it seemed more out of fear than remorse. Robert didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't react. He just sat there, like he didn't understand what was happening, or like he simply didn't care. When they did speak, they blamed each other. Robert claimed he wasn't involved in what happened at the train tracks, but blood and fibers found on his clothes told a different story. Finally, on November 24th, 1993, John Venables and Robert Thompson were found guilty of murdering James Bulger. And that's when the most controversial part came in. They weren't sent to prison. Instead, the court sentenced them to remain in a juvenile detention center until they turned 18 years old. They wouldn't spend a single day in an actual prison. The public did not take the news well. People couldn't believe it. Crowds gathered in the streets shouting in protest. Police even had to use decoy vehicles, which were quickly attacked and pelted with rocks. After the sentencing, both boys were given new identities, a place to live, and full protection by the state. It's estimated that over $2 million were spent on safeguarding these two people, the same two who murdered James. That money came from taxpayers, from the same people who had been begging for justice for a 2-year-old boy. That was what made it so outrageous. In June 2001, both were released. They were now 18 years old. Legally, they became two adults with brand new lives. Their original names were erased under court order. They were given new passports, IDs, backstories. Everything needed to start over from scratch. And of course, people were furious. Many argued it was deeply unfair to spend so much protecting two killers, while thousands of innocent children didn't receive a fraction of that support. But despite all the controversy, the system had made its choice. It chose rehabilitation. It gave them a second chance. Robert, the one who seemed colder, more calculated during the trial, completely vanished. He never reoffended, at least not that we know of, and he never made headlines again. He just disappeared. John, on the other hand, didn't stay out of trouble for long. In 2008, he was arrested for a bar fight and drug possession. In 2010, he was arrested again, but this time for something far worse: possessing child pornography. He wasn't just downloading it, he was also sharing it. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He got out, and just 7 years later, he was back behind bars for the same offense. And even after that, authorities continued to protect his identity, saying that revealing it would put his life in danger. But as crazy as it sounds, James Bulger wasn't the last victim connected to this story. 20 years later, in 2013, another life was lost, indirectly but tragically. A rumor started spreading on social media that a man named Scott Bradley was actually Robert Thompson. It wasn't true. Scott was a 36-year-old father with no criminal record, just an ordinary man who suddenly found himself at the center of a storm of hate. He was accused, harassed, and threatened constantly, even though he didn't understand why. One night he called his mother and told her, "I can't take it anymore. I'm thinking of ending my life." She thought he was just upset, that it would pass. On August 10th, 2012, Scott's body was found. He had taken his own life. And the worst part? Even after his death, some people still believed he was guilty of something he never did. And that brings us to the end of this heartbreaking story. The story of little James Bulger, a 2-year-old boy who endured the unthinkable. I hope you found this video meaningful. If you did, feel free to check out some of my other videos. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing. I'm just getting started and it would mean a lot. This was 44 Days. Good night.